and very good evening to you. I'm Lisa Broom with the CBC Evening News. Leading the news at 7, the current state of the island's economy was the focus of attention today as the Central Bank of Barbados presented its latest economic review. One of the major points coming out of the session is the central bank's view that 2018 will be a challenging year for the Barbados economy. Well, our Ryan Broom was at the central bank for the presentation and he joins us now with the details. So Ryan, what else did we learn today about the state of the economy?
Well, good evening, Lisa. Good evening, viewers. The review was done by Central Bank Governor Cleveston Haynes. He's projected economic growth of 0.5 to 1% for the remainder of this year. He's also revealed that while the country's deficit has been lowered, at the same time foreign reserves have fallen significantly yet again.
On the positive side, Mr. Haynes says there was a modest improvement in Barbados' economic activity for the third consecutive year, but a combination of factors would have limited growth to about 1%. He also says there was some good news about the deficit.
The fiscal deficit fell by $197 million during the first 9 months of the fiscal year, as government accelerated efforts to strengthen the public finances. This deficit, the lowest in 7 years, was attributable to improved revenues arising from the tax measures introduced during the past 2 years and the stabilization of non-interest expenditure. Despite these gains, the improvement was smaller than anticipated, partly the result of the granting of exemptions from the incidence of the new taxes on specific goods and services.
The governor says that lower deficit, along with an adjustment of monetary policy, allowed for a substantial reduction in new credit to government by the central bank. But there was also some not-so-good news, specifically about the foreign reserves.
Modest growth in tourism earnings and the contraction of non-oil imports enabled the external current account deficit to stabilize, but the stock of international reserves declined further to $410 million. This provides approximately 6.6 weeks of import cover, well below the desired benchmark of 12 weeks. This outcome partly reflected the ongoing weakness in private sector capital flows and net public sector outflows, and the delay in the receipt of planned divestment proceeds that were intended to boost reserves.
The central bank governor also says given the continuous decline in the country's foreign reserves, which fell about $274 million in total in 2017, there are two key priorities for 2018 to start turning things around.
Firstly, we need to strengthen the adjustment effort to reduce the fiscal balance to a sustainable level, facilitate a reduction in the debt to GDP ratio over time, and engender the investor confidence required for promoting an acceleration in economic activity over the medium term. Secondly, we need to complement the adjustment effort with significant public and private capital inflows that restore the stock of reserves, at least in line with the 12-week benchmark.
And looking ahead, he says the reversal of the decline of the foreign reserves remains pivotal to the strengthening of Barbados' economic outlook.
Preliminary indicators suggest a robust 2017-2018 winter tourist season, and the outlook for the tourism sector generally remains favorable. In addition, there are significant planned tourism-related investments which will boost reserves if implemented on a timely basis. However, foreign debt service and rising international oil prices are likely to erode some of these projected reserve gains. In this regard, adjustment measures designed to contain demand must be accompanied by significant private and public sector capital inflows to boost the reserves.
The governor adds that achieving the projected 0.5 to 1% growth going forward in 2018 will be dependent on the strength of the performance of the tourism sector and the speed of implementation of investment projects.
Well, Lisa, despite the obvious challenges, the central bank governor made the point that there is no need to panic. He believes, as indicated, that significant public and private sector inflows will be key in getting the reserves back up to benchmark levels. He also says that speed going forward will be critical. Lisa?
Well, thanks, Ryan. Now, let's take a look at one of the critical issues within the review, the reserves. Did the governor mention anything specific that would help us to increase the levels of the reserves?
Well, among other things, some movement on the stalled sale of the Barbados National Terminal Company Limited among others, which is expected to yield more than $100 million alone. And as you know, that deal is still somewhat up in the air after the FTC determined that the proposal from Saul to buy the government-owned entity was essentially anti-competitive. Also, projects like the still pending Hyatt and a little further ahead, Beaches by Sandals, which will probably be one of the biggest tourism projects undertaken in Barbados when it gets going. But, you know, that's how it stays at this stage, at this point in time.
Right. So now what about the tax situation? There's been a lot of talk surrounding the NSRL as well as the foreign exchange fee. Did the governor give any indication how those two performed?
Well, yes, he did. The NSRL yielded about $84.9 million, which was actually less than they were projecting, and the governor said the amendment to the goods affected by the NSRL, by including the items in the VAT-free basket of goods, that would have been partially responsible for the reduced revenue from the tax. As for the foreign exchange fee, well, that yielded about $30.4 million between July and the end of last year. And of course, you know, that's the situation where that is concerned.
Now, the call for the unions for a wage increase, they also had the proposal for a one-off payment. Did the governor address those issues as well?
Well, yes, he did. The governor says given the severe financial constraints that Barbados is currently facing, the major question would be where exactly will that money come from? He says in a situation where government is seeking to cut expenditure and not add to it, and where an arrears situation already exists, a wage increase could potentially make that situation a whole lot worse, where government could find itself owing even more than it presently does. So essentially, he does not believe that a wage increase is a practical approach at this time. Lisa?
Thanks very much, Ryan, for that comprehensive report from the Central Bank Governor's review of the 2007 economic performance for Barbados. Thanks, Ryan. Well, Barbados has dropped 2 places in the U.S.-based World Justice Project's Rule of Law Index, but despite the fall, the island places high in the ranking. Only St. Kitts and Nevis outpaced Barbados in the Caribbean. St. Kitts stands 28th out of 113 countries in the 2017-2018 edition, and Barbados at number 30. The index measures countries' rule of law performance across 8 factors. These are constraints on government powers, absence of corruption, open government, fundamental rights, order and security, regulatory enforcement, civil justice, as well as criminal justice. Now, globally, Denmark ranked first and Venezuela was last. A journey to school came to an abrupt halt for some students this morning following a stabbing incident aboard a school bus. The Transport Board bus was traveling north in the area of Paynes Bay. 4 school children were injured in that altercation. Police say a 15-year-old girl, 2 14-year-olds and a 15-year-old, all boys, were stabbed multiple times about their bodies. The 15-year-old girl and one of the 14-year-old boys were taken to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital by ambulance, while the other 2 injured students went by private vehicle. The injuries aren't deemed to be life-threatening. And the Ministry of Education has denounced the reported violence exhibited by students this morning on the Transport Board school bus, as we just told you. In a statement, the ministry says it has been made aware of the incident involving students of 2 secondary schools and that there might have been some injuries because of the commotion. The statement further added that ministry officials were awaiting communication from the Royal Barbados Police Force as well as the principals of the respective schools before making any additional statements about the incident. Officials have, however, decried any violent behavior among school children. Now, the Education Ministry says it frowns on this type of behavior and has urged all students to conduct themselves in a manner which exemplifies the highest decorum and behavior possible. A 6-man St. Peter family of 3 is tonight homeless after fire razed their home and car this morning. Ralbert Ashton and his 72-year-old father were in the 3-bedroom house at the time of the blaze, but they were unable to save anything. His father had to seek medical attention for smoke inhalation. Mr. Ashton also shares the home with his visually impaired sister, but she was not there at the time. The property is uninsured, and he's hoping officials will lend a helping hand.
Representative from both parties, and they say they will try their best to assist me in any way they could. So,
when you say both parties, which
DLP, BLP, Mr. Colin Jordan, Dave Cumberbatch. Spoke to both individuals.
An adjacent house occupied by Keith Canterbury also received heat damage from the intense flames.
The back windows is broken, the heat, and then the part of the ceiling, the outside bit that hang over that come down. They got burnt, and some pipes got burnt. The plastic pipes for the water. Some of those get damaged. Yeah.
We'll take a short break here and come back with more news. Stay tuned. Labour Minister Senator Dr. Esther Bayasuku has strongly supported the Police Amendment Bill. As she led off debate today in the Upper House, Dr. Bayasuku said that times have changed and the Royal Barbados Police Force cannot operate the way it did when it was formed in 1835. She supports increased statutory powers being granted to the force to ensure peace and public order.
Carrying out that mandate in 1835 and indeed in 1961 looks a lot different than it looks today in the 21st century. Serving and protecting against threats. The threats have changed. The threats may have become more sophisticated in some regard. The demands of the public have also changed, and it is important that the Royal Barbados Police Force continue to be in a position not only to respond to the challenges, but wherever possible to be in a position to be proactive, to anticipate the issues and concerns, and if possible, wherever possible, to be out one step ahead of them.
The Labour Minister says making police stop and searches lawful will go a long way towards crime prevention.
The authority to stop and search a person where that officer has a reasonable suspicion that the person who he or she is stopping has committed an arrestable offence, is committing an arrestable offence, or is about to commit an arrestable offence, and also to stop and search a vehicle which that officer has reasonable suspicion was used in the commission of an offence, will be used in the commission of an offence, or is being used, so past, present, and future tense.
An opposition senator is this evening pouring cold water on government's recent legislation, which gives additional powers, including the invoking of curfews, to police. Senator Wilfred Abrams says, in all good conscience, he could not support the bill in its current form, as it not only contradicted the Constitution, but also afforded police too much liberty in enforcing their jobs.
I am not trying to protect any criminals. My concern for law-abiding members of society is paramount. My concern for their constitutional rights is paramount. I would like the police to have within their powers the tools that they need to effectively do their job. But it must not be a case of circumventing constitutionally guaranteed rights.
An independent senator says officials should look at increasing the number of wardens in schools. Senator John Watson says this may be necessary to deal with the challenges in schools, and he thinks children must be protected instead of being punished.
I think we spend a lot of time looking to punish our young people without guiding them. And very often, all they need is guidance. I believe that when you tell people things, young people things, they follow.
And after the break, we will check in with our regional neighbors, so stay with us.
Across the Caribbean, brought to you by CIBC First Caribbean.
We begin in Jamaica. The government has extended the state of public emergency in the parish of St. James. Prime Minister Andrew Holness brought the Emergency Powers Continuation Resolution to the House of Representatives yesterday, enabling that extension. Now, 51 members voted in favor of the motion being carried, which was more than the two-thirds majority needed by the House. 11 members were absent. The state of emergency will continue until May 2nd. Mr. Holness says there are still criminals in St. James who need to be apprehended.
Reasonable to expect that even with extraordinary powers, it will take some time to affect the situation in St. James. As the intelligence picture is built, and not only perpetrators, but also we are building the intelligence picture on the facilitators as well. And we will be targeting both the street-level criminal and the facilitators.
Guyana police have launched a manhunt for a shooter whose latest victims are now hospitalized after a recent attack. We get more in this report.
Police reveal that about 21 hours 40 Saturday night, the two victims, who are currently hospitalized in a stable condition, were at this shop at Jamaica Market Square when they were approached by the suspect and an argument ensued. It was further revealed that the suspect, a known character to the police, was driving a minibus. He reportedly fled the scene after the argument and returned shortly with a handgun and opened fire in the direction of the victims, who were at the time playing a game of dominoes. He then escaped through this street. Commander of C Division Calvin Brutus explained that the assailant has allegedly committed a host of similar gun crimes, robberies, and other violent crimes.
So far, we've been able to obtain statements from witnesses and the victims. We know who the suspect is because he's known to the police. He has a history of brushing with the law. However, we've made checks for the areas where his known address, last known address, and the areas that he is known to hang out. But our efforts to arrest him is unsuccessful.
The suspect, known by his alias Andrew, frequents neighboring countries, but border patrols have already been placed on alert to foil any attempt by him to escape from the law.
Immediately after we discovered who the suspect was, we circulated our messages interdivision-wise. And there is collaboration going on between our detectives and those detectives at the bordering regions especially.
In St. Lucia, Pave residents are calling on the authorities to address the garbage pileup in their community. They say the situation has been festering for some time now, and they're worried about drain blockages and potential health risks.
Garbage everywhere. Pave residents say they can no longer tolerate the piles of refuse along the roadsides, clogging drains and entering their yards. They are also worried that the waste can pose a risk to life and property during heavy rainfall. They add that the uncollected garbage is also a threat to public health. One resident says her surroundings are almost unrecognizable.
There was Pave Road before, but I will come back and find Mom's Stinkeroo. That's what I find there. Mom, you can see that there. That looks like Pave Road. You ever knew Pave? But it looks like Pave. Malaria, all kind of old disease, and them kind of flu that running there, it will make it worse. Yes, that's what you can see.
Marinette Gabriel says the situation is worrying.
About 2 months ago, 3 months ago that day, 2 months ago that day, they not come in and take it at all. They have to do something about that to come and take the rubbish there. And the dog making mess with the rubbish there too. A lot of rubbish.
Some residents concede that littering and improper waste disposal are problems in the area, but say the entire community is suffering.
The government of the Bahamas has been explaining why it was necessary to make changes to the country's laws dealing with the interception of communication. But this after many people said they were unaware that the bill even existed.
Months after tabling an amended version of the Interception of Communications Bill, otherwise known as the Spy Bill, in the House of Assembly, Minister of State for Legal Affairs, the Honorable Ellsworth Johnson, addressed the issue to a packed crowd at the University of the Bahamas' Harry Seymour Library. Monday's meeting comes after government enlisted the research firm Public Domain to conduct phone polling and focus group research. That research revealed that most respondents had never even heard of the bill. Johnson says this is why it's so important to have public consultations.
One of the things that we all agree is of the necessity for the bill. And I think we all agree that there has to be public consultation so that at the end of the day, what the government produces is in accordance with its constitutional mandate, and that is to produce laws for the peace, order, and good governance of the Bahamas. It's very important to have the views of the persons who you will govern, to have their views in legislation because it lends a flavor to it. It represents the will and the desire of the people.
The Interception of Communications Bill is meant to replace the Listening Devices Act of 1972, which government feels is inadequate in the fight against criminals using modern technology.
We're going to go back to the drawing board, look at and there's just a little slight tweaking. Like Mr. Monroe said, he thinks every aspect of the bill should require an application to the judge. Mr. Hilton looked at did a comparative analysis, and he says, you know, this is not new. It's not something that has not been done before, but we have to produce something that fits into the ethnos of the Bahamas.
We'll give you a peek into the world of sports in just a moment, but before we get to that, here is a tip from Cooperators General Insurance.
Across the Caribbean, brought to you by CIBC First Caribbean.
This tip of the day is brought to you by Cooperators General Insurance Company Limited. Insurance the way you want it to be.
Long-term marijuana use may affect memory and concentration levels, which in turn can hinder performance at school and work. This tip is brought to you in association with the National Council on Substance Abuse, promoting drug awareness.